All right, guys, welcome to Beyond the Muscle. I'm excited to welcome our next guest, Utti Hietala. Utti's back for a much requested part two, and yeah, we had a great chat a couple of months back talking about various different topics. So you guys should definitely check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, today I wanted to take a deeper dive into training this time and get some of Utti's insights. I've worked out that we've actually got over 50 years combined training experience together, which is pretty
Oh yeah,
wild.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
kind of shows our age there, but yeah, how are things going, Uti? I know we caught up recently,
Uh,
but that's good.
well, yeah, it's much of the same. So that's it's Groundhog Day for a bodybuilder.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What really is. It's like um, so. As far as my own training goes, it's
What's going
like
on?
what I've been doing, not just this off season, but for I don't know, for not exactly for 10 years, but for plus 5 years, is like priority cycling, which I call it. It's like because it all comes down to not being able to basically at our level of like advancement. Uh, I don't think it's really possible to build every single muscle group that on your plate at the same time in the same program because the
Mm,
MEV, the minimum effective volume of all your major muscle groups combined at our age and level of our advancement. And I have to declare the level of advancement isn't like an absolute thing that compared to other people, but it's compared to your own genetic potential, really. So we're so close to to our own genetic potential. We're trying to scrape the bottom of the barrel for the those last few pounds that we can just eke out of muscle growth. But anyway, at that point, if you kind of calculate, if you try to build all your muscle groups at once in the same
mm.
program, you have to do so much training in terms of intensity and or volume to exceed your MEV for all your muscle groups that the totality of your training actually exceeds your systemic MRV, which is your maximum recoverable volume. So your recovery capacity systemically uh, probably no longer allows you to try to build everything at the same time. And I kind of figured that out for myself almost 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Then Dr. Mike Israetel actually helped coin the terminology for that. I was just, I had to go the long way of,
Yeah.
explaining these things. And then he came up with all these nice little MEV, MRV, three-letter acronyms.
Hmm.
But it's yeah. So what I've been doing is the most simple way to explain it would be like, okay, if I can't realistically recover from trying to build every single muscle group in the same training program, essentially,
Yeah.
you can, but then you have to remember that your maintenance volume or your maintenance dose of training, it's much lower. It's much easier to maintain your gains than to actually elicit new growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once you drop down a part of your body, but part of your main muscle groups to your maintenance volume, that really frees up a lot of systemic recovery resources.
Mm.
And suddenly the equation uh, works again. It's like you can,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
muscle groups you're still trying to, have over your MEV, you can now actually recover from that. So what I started doing, I guess it was like 7 years ago, was that I was like, okay, now I'm simply going to accept not trying to build everything at once. So I started rotating through like these. They were like 12-week blocks of either upper body or lower body
Hmm.
specialization,
Okay.
and it was like a mirror image of each other. It was
Yeah.
like when I had like my upper body specialization phase, it was like my legs were at minimum maintenance volume.
Hmm.
And I would train in maybe 30 minutes a week. I sort of could figure out that, like, what was the minimum amount of training I could do for my legs to not
Hmm.
lose size.
Yeah.
And that freed up a lot of recovery resources plus time
Yeah.
in the gym to really focus on exceeding MED for my upper body. So I would
Yeah.
really just hammer the volume and the intensity for the upper body for 12 weeks. And after that was done, then I would just flip it around. I
Hmm.
would do a lower body specialization phase where the upper body, now I was training maybe 30 minutes a week and I was doing legs 3 times a week with high volume, high intensity and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's primarily been like the mode of operation for me whenever I'm trying to eke out any little, whenever I'm in a calorie surplus, basically, when I'm
Yeah, yeah.
quote unquote bulking.
Hmm.
And the downside of that is that you're kind of accepting that at no point in time when you will be trying to build everything, you know,
Mm.
you're no longer trying to, build a overall size. And what that comes down to, if you mathematically, like you can kind of put it in the way that if you just rotate through, let's say, these 12-week blocks of upper body or lower body specialization, that means that within a training year, if you're, in a calorie surplus
Yeah.
for 12 months straight, you will end up with 6 months of building your upper body and
Hmm.
maintaining your lower body, and 6 months the other way around.
Yeah.
So you're kind of you have to like accept the fact that only half the time you're trying to build kind of like each muscle on average.
How do you deal with that, like psychologically? That must be quite challenging.
Yeah, at first, like because I kind of figured that out. I had an inkling of this, like just based on experience plus the physiological, I guess, knowing how the body works and understanding that. But I was it took me a few years to kind of let it sink in.
Mm.
I was kind of resisting it,
Right.
and then after a few years, I was like, okay, I just got to be honest with myself. I can't try to build it. I mean, if I try to build everything at once, nothing grows.
Mm.
That was the point I was at, because I was trying to, exceed the minimum effective volume for everything,
Yeah.
which has led to one of two things. The other thing is like, okay, if I actually could exceed the effective dose for everything, then I would run into overtraining and under recovery because my systemic MRV wouldn't be enough. So I would have to like deload every 2 weeks or something. So
Mm.
that wouldn't be good. Or if I could recover from it, that would mean essentially that nothing is at MEV.
Yeah.
So nothing is growing.
Mm.
So I had to like be really honest with myself and just accept the fact that, okay, I can kind of try to bang my head against the wall, kind of telling myself, oh yeah, you can still build everything at once, and then realistically just, get zero out of it.
Yeah.
Or I could go and split the year up into these phases where I can still essentially half of the time for each muscle group
Hmm.
I can kind of get more slow growth out of those. So that's better than zero.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how I eventually explained it to myself. And there's like a lot of variations you can do on that. The most previous one after the shows in 2024. So I always look at the stage photos and I reassess the physique. And okay, I was like, yeah, nothing new. My quads and my arms always like a weakness that I always have to especially prioritize
Hmm.
in the off season. What was surprising to me was that actually my chest was also a little bit weaker than before.
Okay.
Chest has always responded well to training for me, but these last 5 or 6 years, I've had so much nagging injuries and pains there, so that actually showed. So it was okay. Now I have like three areas to focus on primarily, which is quads and arms, and now chest and back, shoulders, hamstrings, all that. That was like pretty decent. So that's not as much of a priority. So it was really simple. I now I kind of for the most of the time I focus on chest, arms, and quads.
Hmm.
That's like I'll do that for as long as I can.
Yeah.
I think I got like 4 or 5 months straight, prioritizing those
Yeah.
until I had to kind of, because you sort of accumulate micro trauma in your connective tissues, and when
Mm.
you're training at really high volumes and
Yeah.
intensities. So at some point you have to kind of switch over to the other muscle groups. But that was good because I got like a long period of focusing on what matters the most for my physique.
Hmm.
So that was chest, quads, and arms. And then I kind of, even though I don't need to focus on those as much, but I did like a 10-week, which is a way shorter, a
Yeah.
10-week stint with the less important muscle groups for my case, which was like back, shoulders, and hamstrings.
Hmm.
So that was a brief um, program, and now I'm back
Hmm.
to hopefully a long stint with chest, quads, and arms. So yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think that's quite a unique take. I would hazard a guess and say not many bodybuilders train in that way. I think I would find it difficult, like you did at first, to actually
It's a mind fuck
psychologically.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
definitely.
because it took me like I remember there was probably 2 or 3 years when subconsciously I knew this was the logical thing to do,
Hmm.
but I just couldn't accept it.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was it was like I just always was pushing it out of my mind, and
Mm,
and it just took a lot of time to accept the reality
mm.
and then act based upon the actual reality and not just what you're hoping to get.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, have you found that switching it has made a difference?
Well, it's really hard to tell, but because either way, like after training for 20, what do I have, like 28 years in the gym at this point, and you know, even in my case, it's like oftentimes I'm even not trying to build new muscle as much as regain muscle that I've lost due
Yeah.
to injuries. But anyway, it's like in any case, it's going to be really slow, even if I make the best possible gains for me.
Hmm.
So it's hard to tell, but at least now I actually, based on all logical facts and how based on physiology, based on everything we know about how muscle growth works and how you stimulate that, now I can honestly say that I can that everything is lined up.
Right.
Like there's, it's like I actually have an honest chance of inducing some small additional slow growth. Whereas if I tried to build everything all at once, I probably, like, I would just be going nowhere.
Mm.
So there's, at least it gives me hope.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
put it that way. So at first I had to abandon all hope for
Yeah.
try to build everything at once
Mm.
to actually gain hope intellectually. But I don't know. It's I feel like it's kind of a cool, if nothing else, it gives me variation. It
Hmm.
gives me, because the phases are different,
Yeah, yeah.
and come on, like I get to do chest and arms.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Like really, who doesn't love that? And then I
Yeah.
do quads pretty hard to sort of to compensate for that bro training. But yeah, it's um hard to say if it's
Hard
any
to say.
better, if it's
Okay.
gonna make any difference. But isn't that natural bodybuilding
Yeah.
in a nutshell anyway?
It
Like,
takes time, doesn't it, to see how to see how things are really panning out. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah, and
does.
plus we have to like work really diligently for usually at least for a year
Mm,
to then later assess that, okay, did I gain anything this year? It's
mm,
it's,
yeah.
it's almost like, so it's like we're always operating on kind of faith and hope.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, interesting actually. I've just this week switched up my training. So I've been training on a 5 day split for as long as I can remember actually, since I've
Mm,
returned to bodybuilding. And 5 days, with a busy job, with dad duties, picking kids up, dropping kids off,
yeah.
running the podcast on the side, and just being a husband and a dad is hard. It's hard to fit in, and I'm about to embark on like a 4 day split where I have an
Mm,
upper lower, just to see how it pans out. Because I think I can, yeah, I think I can get the same amount of growth, and get close to the same volume. And interestingly, I think there's a few bodybuilders. I think Jeff Alberts, Ben Howard from the UK, they train
mm,
3 times a week. I think Alberto Nunez, I think he's like four, but he wasn't 3 times a week for a while.
Yeah, but
And
these guys
yeah,
are kind of known for being
yeah,
lowish
yeah.
volume.
But
So it's a good sign that they're probably fast twitch dominant
mm,
genetically, so they can kind of it's actually better for them to limit the volume, but they can
mm,
also sort of get away with less volume. It,
yeah,
it
yeah.
it it goes hand in hand. But if you're not fast twitch dominant and you're because it comes down to individual volume landmarks
Mm,
or like minimum effective dose, which is individual
yeah.
and it's muscle group specific and everything. So uh, the research on just training volume itself is pretty clear that if people who don't make good gains on lower volumes, who are sort of coined non-responders or low
Mm,
responders, once they actually increase the volume sufficiently, they actually pretty reliably become standard responders.
yeah.
So there's like you should kind of I think it's always smart to start with the lower volumes
Mm,
and really like because the one thing that you shouldn't sacrifice in any case is the quality and the
yes.
intensity
Yeah.
because it's like it's a bad way to go about it is to okay all the studies say that you have to do 52 sets for quads and okay how am I going to do 52 sets of quads well I'm going to
Mm,
half-ass it all the way through that's really not the way to go especially because actually most of those volume studies are done to failure
yeah.
so they're not done on half-assed sets
Hmm.
and still like they see that there is a decreasing slope for
Mm,
from added volume, but it's still like you get more gains from more volume. It's just that you get the most benefit from the first sets, and then it kind of starts tapering off.
yeah.
But yeah, I kind of always uh, recommend that people start with slightly lower volumes
Mm,
and really just fix in the intensity and the quality and the focus
yeah, yeah.
and then kind of just keep that fixed. don't
Mm,
don't start to don't start to half-ass any sets or just train either to failure or very close to it and focus on technique, focus on quality of execution, and then if the lower volume doesn't seem to be you know giving you growth, then
mm,
add a set or two here or
yeah,
there,
yeah.
and then once you kind of that way you can kind of find your own MAV.
Mm,
And once you find that, okay, this is a good volume for me, I'm getting decent gains. I don't think there's I don't think there's much of a point. Well, I'm just going to keep increasing the volume from here,
mm,
because just
you can't,
kind
yeah.
of squeeze the juice out from that level of volume. It
Yeah,
might
yeah.
serve you for a year or so until you have
Mm,
to increase. So
yeah. That makes sense. I suppose one of the limitations of extrapolating from that 52 set study is that yeah
mm,
it might work initially but how's 52 sets going to look or not let's say 52 sets is obviously unrealistic but how's very very high volume going to look 6 months down the line how your joints going to be.
yeah. And even in
That's,
that study, they actually built up to that 52
yeah,
sets.
yeah, they
So
did, yeah.
so the high volume group, I think their average over, I can't remember if it was a 6, 10, or 12-week study. Maybe it was 12 weeks even,
Mm,
but it wasn't longer than that.
no.
So I think like their top volume in the high volume group was 52 sets, but their
Mm,
average volume over that training period was like 37 sets or something.
yeah.
So those studies, um, I think you could kind of call it was basically like a leg specialization or priority training study
Mm,
because nobody could do 52 sets or even 37 sets of failure
hmm.
year round before. I think the one thing, because it's funny, the volume research kind of, they've done good meta analyses on these, and just based on those, you can kind of see that there is that uh, trend of diminishing returns, but you still get positive returns for
Yeah,
volume.
yeah.
So you get the most bang from the first 10 sets or the first
Yeah,
15 sets, but then as you add like 5 or 10 more sets, you get a little bit more, but it starts to taper
tapers
out.
off, yeah.
However, it's like they haven't found that theorized. They've always theorized that it's like a U-shaped curve where at one point when you go to, I don't know how many sets you would have to do that, you actually start to grow less. And
Right,
they
right,
haven't found that.
right.
But having done this for what, 28 years and coaching people for since 2005, and I can tell, I can really just say from experience that if you try to do more and more sets in those 30 to 40 set ranges,
Hmm.
it's, yeah, it's possible that your musculature would be able to take that, like your
Hmm.
muscle tissue, because that actually recovers pretty well.
Yeah,
It's going to be other systems and other tissues that are going to break down.
yeah.
It's going to be your connective tissues, or if you try to do that for too many muscle groups at a time, you're just going to be systemically overreached and overtrained, and you're not going to
Mm.
be sleeping, and your testosterone is just going to tank, and
Hmm.
that's going to kind of bring in the that's going to be your MRV. That's going to be
Mm.
what limits your recovery, not possibly not the muscle tissue itself, but
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes, it's going to be like something's going to break if you try to
Hmm.
do that for too long. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, for a specialization phase, potentially it makes sense. But yeah, yeah, that's interesting. There's definitely a sweet spot when it comes to volume. I've found.
Mm-hmm.
Another area I wanted to touch on, Uti, was lengthened partials. So in
Yeah.
terms of like my own experience with them, I use them a little bit less now, but I was on certain back movements over the past year. I was definitely kind of neglecting that end range and just neglecting the contraction rather, and just focusing more on the stretch. Whereas these days, over the past, I'd say 2 months, I've kind of reverted back to kind of a full ROM, hit failure on certain movements on certain sets, and then adopt some length and partials at the end of each set.
Mm.
And I find that
Yep.
works better for me, rather than just going all in on the whole length and partials thing. What's your
Yeah.
take?
Yeah.
What's
Doing
your take
nothing
on it?
but. Yeah. Yeah. How long do you have to?
Nah,
I could
give
talk
me like a
about this.
brief summary of,
Yeah.
let's
The,
say,
but there's well, few pointers. As far as the length and partials, or just emphasizing the stretch and that range of the motion, I think it really works best for those muscle groups that aren't usually taxed in those lengthened ranges.
okay.
So what comes to mind is calf raises,
Mm,
because calf raises are like whichever machine you're going to use, it's going to be the hardest at the top, at near the peak contraction.
mm,
And if you always try to go towards that peak contraction, it's going to really limit your loading in that bottom half of the movement.
mm,
And for myself, I can't remember how many years I've done this now, but whenever I'm trying to build my calves in the off season, I only do like every set I start with one full rep. The
mm.
first rep I go, to full contraction, but
Yeah.
every single rep after that, I I pause at the bottom and I
Mm.
only come halfway back up.
Right.
So
Okay.
so it's basically just pause length and partials after
Yeah.
that. And as soon as I started doing that, I noticed like tremendous DOMs. Like my calves
Mhm.
got sore every time I was doing that. And that didn't really happen in the last 10 years when I was doing
Mm.
like full ROM calf raises. And my calves actually grew.
Hmm.
And I started getting like they grew slow, but they were one of the muscle groups that were actually better now in 2024 when I competed last,
Yeah.
compared to like my earlier competitive seasons. And I
Hmm.
attribute that to really focusing on those lengthened partials,
Hmm.
because the traditional way of training calves is like going all the way up and
Yeah.
even perhaps pausing in that peak contraction. And that really
Hmm.
limits your loading in that
Yeah.
lengthened range. So for calves, I think it's a great idea.
Hmm.
Another one is lateral raises with dumbbells or barbells. It's a different thing with cables, because with a cable you can set it up so that it actually uh, gives you direct resistance even from that starting position.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
if you do like a single arm cable lateral and it starts from hip height,
Yeah.
then you have like direct resistance in the bottom. But most people don't do that, so they do dumbbell laterals for years, and those are only hard at the top,
Yeah.
and there's really no resistance in that length and range. So that was another thing that I feel like I even saw that in my physique. Like delts were another thing that wasn't It definitely wasn't worse than before. Maybe it was even better than before.
Mm.
And I did a lot of lengthened partials, high rep sets, either with dumbbells or a lateral raise machine. That's
Yeah.
even better in my mind because if you do like the John Meadows style, he calls them like called them like delt burns, side delt burns with
Yeah.
dumbbells, heavy dumbbells. So even Arnold used to do those back in the day,
Mm.
but it's still if you can find a machine that provides that direct resistance in that length and range,
Yep.
I like to just do the length and partials on those. I think that's the best.
Mm.
And it's like because if you think about it, if you do regular lateral raises with dumbbells, or if you do upright rows, free weight, or even with a cable,
Yeah.
those are still going to be hardest at that top position.
Yeah. Yeah.
So delts are another muscle group that kind of, if you train it traditionally, so to speak, it's probably you're leaving some of that loading in that lengthened range
Yeah.
out of the picture. And third one is back
Yeah.
because you're really a lot stronger in that stretch position and your pull downs and your rows than you
Mm.
are in that contracted position. And when you kind of if you say that okay, now that I can't, if you do like chin ups or something until you can't clear the bar with your chin,
Hmm.
and then you're like, okay, that's
We're
failure.
done. Yeah. Yeah.
You probably because that's the completely hardest part of the rep is
Mm.
that that contraction,
Yeah.
and you're way stronger in that lengthened position.
Hmm.
You can probably do like 5 partial reps, or like
Hmm.
half reps in that stretch position after that. And that's what you usually don't overload if you always do full ROM.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for back, especially lats, I think like I've been doing half reps. Like if I do pull ups, I
Hmm.
only do it to forehead height,
Okay. And that's
and
for
it's
all
like
reps.
yeah, all reps.
Mm. Right.
But
Okay.
however, if you're talking like mid upper back
Hmm.
on rows,
Yeah.
I think you should do at least like one movement where you also go to full contraction,
Mm.
because those like retractors of your back, different muscle groups there that do that, those tend to be hit more in that shortened position.
Mm.
So on rows, I probably wouldn't do as many lengthened partials exclusively, at least, or I
Mm.
would include. And I think the best way to do that is if you have a machine that's loaded properly. If you
Hmm.
have like a machine, uh, I think Nautilus rows, the Star Trek row, which is it's basically the old flex leverage row. Uh, Machines that actually are heaviest at the bottom, and
Yeah.
then the resistance profile sort of tapers off,
Yeah.
becomes easier when you go towards full contraction. That's like a really good place to do full ROM,
Mm.
because that way it's both giving you a challenge in that lengthened position and that contracted position, but the contracted position won't be so much harder that it's going to limit how many reps you're going to get in the lengthened position,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you catch what. Yeah. So but those are like plus, yeah, I would say biceps as well, because if you do like regular biceps curls
Hmm.
with free weights, it's always just going to be zero direct resistance in at the bottom, unless
Yeah.
you're doing which is why they've probably found that doing preacher curls or Scott curls with a slanted with a properly slanted like arm support,
Yeah.
where even a free weight actually provides direct resistance when your arm is straight.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's been pretty good. And then if you do incline curl, this is a funny little difference there, because uh, they still don't have proper data on the difference, or like which one is more important. Going to an anatomical long muscle length, which
Hmm.
for biceps would be like doing an incline dumbbell curl,
Yeah.
because that puts your at least the short head of your biceps under stretch, because you're in shoulder extension. And it's but the thing is, with the incline dumbbell curl, okay, now you're in an anatomical stretch position, but there's no direct resistance in that stretch position because it's a free weight biceps curl where the dumbbell is only pulling downward.
Mm.
So to fix that, okay, then you can do. Dr. Mike's been popularizing this, but it was already in that old Arnold's Encyclopedia where Robbie Robinson was doing the movement, which is lying.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, lying down dumbbell curls
Hmm.
because most people don't have the range of motion to really get their arm perpendicular. Is
Yeah,
that the word to
that
the
is
floor?
it.
Yeah, straight up. So even like at full stretch, their arm will still be at an angle.
Yeah.
And with a dumbbell, then there is both the anatomical stretch and you're providing direct resistance.
Mm.
However, then you have like a preacher curl or any type of preacher curl machine, but even the freeway version works for that. It's providing you direct resistance when your arm is straight at the
Hmm.
bottom of the movement, but anatomically, it's putting your biceps not in a stretch position, but actually a shortened position because you're
Mm.
in shoulder flexion. So they did a study, at least one of them, comparing the two, like incline curls and preacher curls. And then uh, I can't remember the exact results of that study, but overall, from what I remember, is like they still kind of need to do more research to find out which one of these things is more important: getting to an
Right.
anatomical long, near a stretch,
Yeah.
or just getting resistance, direct resistance on a muscle in the end range of that
Hmm.
movement. Obviously, getting both at the same time that's the best choice. But
Mm.
it's an interesting topic. And then I remember over 10 years ago, I'm surprised the TikTokers and all the influencers today aren't like, really hammering that. There was this concept of longitudinal muscle growth.
Right.
So it's about adding sarcomeres also in series, not just in parallel. So
Right.
between your, let's say you have a biceps muscle, which has its insertion and origin. And between that insertion and origin, you have a number of sarcomeres. And you have some layers of, each muscle fiber is like, it's like a big tube with a bunch of sarcomeres on there.
Yeah.
It's like train cards or something.
Hmm.
And the traditional mode of muscle growth is that you kind of add more sarcomeres in parallel. So you add more trains,
Yeah.
on
Right.
top of each other.
Right.
So that sort of makes it thicker. However, it was over 10 years ago that they had kind of pretty decent data on that if you do stretched, like stretch overload training, basically like lengthened training,
Mm.
that then you also induce adding sarcomeres in series. So you start packing more of those train cards
Mm.
between the insertion and origin, and that's like a different type of muscle growth. They called it longitudinal muscle growth. So
Right.
that
Right.
was one of the earliest signs in the literature where I was okay. There's seriously something special about training in a under stretch load and something like that. And
Mm.
nobody's kind of talking about that these days. But okay, that's probably because now we have over 10 studies on actual empirical muscle growth,
Yeah.
that you don't have to just, go by some individual mechanism of sarcomeres in series or parallel. You can actually concretely measure like which one built a bigger biceps.
Yeah. Maybe that's why. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a more direct measurement of it. But it's a good thing. But like all things that kind of gain speed and momentum in the space, I think the lengthened partials and the lengthened base bias training kind of people got too excited about it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like it's like for example, I mentioned that I think calf raises, lateral raises, back training, and maybe even biceps training are like those are the parts where traditional training would kind of leave you not challenging
Hmm.
the length and range as much. So it's good to specifically use like lengthened bias training there. But if you think about any kind of a chest press, bench press, or any type of a squat,
Mm.
leg press. So for quads and chest, um, those are already those are movements that are overloading the length and range
Yeah.
like inherently, naturally. So and even further, if you think about your, I don't know if you can say I'm too close to the camera, but if you imagine doing a bench press,
Mm.
like at the bottom of a bench press, especially if you do it with dumbbells and you go kind of lower even than a straight barbell would allow you to, you're actually achieving full stretch on your pecs, and the load is the resistance is hardest at that point. So it's
Yeah.
a really loaded, lengthened position. But then when you press up, your humerus, your upper arm, uh, you're only going to be bringing them parallel to each other until you're locked out.
Mm.
And that range of motion for your chest is actually like 2/3 of what it could do, because the maximum contraction for your chest would require you to do like an old school style cable crossover where you literally cross your arms.
Mm.
So that would be like the last 1/3 of the movement.
Right. Yeah.
And in the literature, for example, I think Milo Wolf, who has done probably most of the work in this area,
Yeah.
he kind of defined that, okay, the whatever is considered a lengthened partial in the literature is up to 2/3 of your range of
Right.
motion.
Okay.
So so technically, I think any type of a bench press or a chest
Yeah.
press is already a lengthened partial,
Mm.
because it's roughly like 2/3 of
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
your, and it's loaded heaviest at the bottom.
yeah.
And a similar thing for your quads, well, at least your vasti muscles,
Mm.
because your rec fem it's not really worked that well, and because it's a hip flexor, and when you do squats or leg presses, you're doing hip extension. So
Mhm.
so the rec fem isn't really that active in those, but all the vasti muscle, vastus lateralis, intermedius, vastus medialis, those are purely knee
Mm.
extensors.
Yeah.
So whenever your knee is flexed, they're in full stretch.
Mm.
And any type of squat, deep leg press, you have that full stretch on those vasti muscles, and it's also the hardest resistance of the movement.
Mm.
And you could kind of go through as it's kind of like, because the resistance really drops off as you come back up from that bottom position in the squat.
Mhm.
Even like a squat or a deep leg press, it's essentially a lengthened partial, like a 2/3 movement
Mm.
for your quads, because to achieve full contraction of the rec fem, I just said that you wouldn't consider that there, but this is like a technical babble about it.
Mhm.
It's like, technically, if you want full contraction of your quads, you would include the rec fem being in full hip flexion. So
Mm.
it's like the end position, like your top peak contraction of your seated leg extension.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so technically, any type of a squat or a leg press, if you do it from full depth,
Mhm.
that's already inherently technically a lengthened partial.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't think it's all that. Um, like, you can still kind of bias the lengthened range on leg extensions by lying back, because
Yeah.
that's they've actually shown that in a few studies that it's good for your rec fem
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah. I've seen those ones. Yeah.
Yeah, but overall, I would say that just your traditional full ROM training,
Mm.
and in those few muscle groups, your calves, your back, your lateral raises for the delts, and maybe your biceps, try to
Mhm.
also include some of that length and range work, and then you're probably getting the best of everything.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, that's a really good way, really nuanced way of looking at it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
great.
Plus
Um,
plus the difference in like the actual magnitude of, like, the effect size from comparing like a shortened partial to full ROM, or because full ROM and lengthened partial seem to be, because they both include the lengthened position.
Mm.
So at the moment, it kind of looks like that they are similarly effective for muscle growth, but there's a slight benefit from doing either one of those compared to shortened partials
Yeah,
only.
yeah.
But even there, um, the difference in hypertrophy that you can actually expect, I can't remember what it averages out to, but it's not massive.
No,
It's
no.
like if you let's say you have like joint problems or something, or if you just are not very mobile and you can't really go to a deep length of movement,
Yeah.
but you can do like shortened movements. Yeah, that's still like really good. You should do that and not like be bummed out at about losing gain, leaving gains on the table
No,
because
no,
you
no.
can't do like lengthened partials. It's not that big of a difference,
No.
I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I've heard that as well. Yeah, no, some great points there. Another area I wanted to touch on, Uti, was rest periods. That's something I don't really hear people talk about much. I
Mm,
started tracking my rest periods maybe like 6, 8 months ago in between sets, and for me it makes sense to do so because it kind of standardizes everything. It means that I can effectively gauge progress like week on week. And obviously, I don't have the same rest periods for things like a lateral raise as
mm.
a heavy squat or a heavy hack squat. I tend to have in between 1 and 3 minutes depending on the exercises. What are your takes on rest periods? Do you track your own rest or do you just go when you feel ready?
Actually, I have the exact opposite history. I
Right,
used to track I would have like a stopwatch
right,
for the
right.
first 10 years that I trained, and I was always like recording my rest times and everything.
Hmm.
But for the last 10 years, no, I've
Hmm.
never really tracked those because there's, mm, well, before we even go to like what the data says,
Mm.
it's like even the humidity of the air in your gym actually influences how long you should rest.
Mm.
The temperature of the air in your gym, how well are you wearing like a baggy hoodie and
Mm.
a bunch of layers, or are you all Under Armoured out or
Yeah,
whatever?
yeah.
It's if you have you been doing any type of cardio lately,
Mm.
or have you just been doing like there are all these things, plus the obvious one being like you said, like if you do a lateral raise, you can
Mm.
probably rest for 40 seconds and
Yeah,
go
yeah.
again. Versus if you do like a really hard set of barbell squats, it might take you out for 7 to 10 minutes.
Mm.
But still, it's even within the same movements, like conditions in the gym and your hydration status and
Mm.
like atmospheric pressure, the things that are really outside of your control and which can be
Mm.
highly variable. All of these are things that influence how long you should rest, at least like to catch your breath, and
Yeah,
not make that the limiting factor on your strength training set or hypertrophy set.
yeah,
So that's why I kind of just go based on when do I feel ready
yeah, yeah.
in these
Interesting.
conditions currently. When do I feel ready to put on, do another good set, essentially?
Yeah.
And that kind of goes in line with the research on, how long should you rest? Because what it really comes down to for hypertrophy is which types of interset rest periods allow you to accumulate the most effective volume.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's why it's like if they compare um, fixed set protocols. So like both of the groups have like, I don't know, 10 sets, and they're not
Hmm.
going to do extra sets. In that situation, when you rest longer, you're going to be able to do those 10 sets, especially, like sets 7, 8, 9.
Mm.
You're going to be able to produce more force. You're going to be able to use heavier loads, and you're going to be able to accumulate more volume in total
Yeah.
because you rested longer. And that's why they've kind of noticed that, okay, in those situations, in fixed set protocols, resting longer tends to lead to better muscle growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, when that's not really ecologically valid, in the sense that people who rest like for shorter periods, they tend to do a little bit more sets, you know,
Mm, yeah.
and it allows for that. And when you actually um, when you have equal total volume at the end of the workout, like
Mm,
if the guys were resting a little less between sets and they kind of, tire out quicker between sets,
hmm
but they do like one or two extra sets, they've really noticed that once you tally up the effective volume of each type of training session, if the
Yeah.
volume is equated, then you're what you can expect hypertrophy wise, it's also equated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can kind of pick and choose which way you want to train,
Mm,
and that's for example for me, I have 4 days of the week, three, four. I have 4 days of the week when I can kind of uh, I have a I have a window for my training where I don't have to really rush the process. So I
hmm
take my time and, but it's usually no longer than 2 or 3 minutes, even on leg. Maybe on leg days it's like 3 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have pretty good, stamina and training condition for that. So I don't have to wait for a long time. However, I have these like quick sessions when I probably isn't I'm not really supposed to be training that day, but
Right. Yeah.
I'm doing like my knee rehab stationary cycling for 20 minutes, and I'm like, I could probably get like a 15-minute pump workout and
hmm
get to accumulate some volume. In that type of a situation where you're crunched for time, uh, then I just go like all in. I do like antagonistic supersets with zero rest, or
Yeah.
I do drop sets or something like that. And there's even good data on that. That it's just like those are called time efficient strategies in the literature, and it's self-explanatory. You get more work done in much less time.
hmm
However, for example, in drop sets, I think the most recent analysis of drop sets versus straight sets kind of showed that if you count every single drop set as one set and try to compare that to doing straight sets with rest in between,
Yeah.
it's not equally effective on a set per set basis
hmm
because you're kind of tiring out and the volume you're accumulating is less and less.
Yeah.
However, it's still like I think it was like 1.3 drop sets equated to about one regular straight set, and
hmm
you can get done with a lot more drop sets. It's like it becomes more time efficient if you do the math.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that makes sense there. Yeah. I mean, going back to the rest periods, yeah, there are times where I don't quite feel ready. I think the heat is one big factor there. If I'm feeling
yeah.
very hot, very sweaty, I think I can need a bit more time, and then I will give myself more time there. Another factor with the rest periods is just it's just time. That's the thing. I mean, if you were to rest for very long, sure you can get more out of each set, but yeah, I can't be in the gym for like three hours plus. I need to.
Exactly.
Time is
Yeah, yeah.
definitely a factor as well. But it is, yeah, that's an interesting topic there. I wasn't aware of the literature surrounding that. Um, Next topic, Uti, mind-muscle connection. This is something I think you'd have
Mm,
to have an interesting take on. There is some exercise in the gym where I know I'm getting like a tremendous amount of like mechanical tension on like a heavy hack squat, a heavy pendulum squat, but I don't get as much of a pump as let's say a high rep leg extension.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on the idea of mind muscle connection as a proxy for not so much proxy for growth, but how important or how much stock should someone put in the idea of mind muscle connection?
I think it only becomes an issue when you have a really stubborn muscle group that doesn't respond to like all the good basic stuff
Right,
uh,
okay.
that's in place. Like, let's say you do really technically sound pull downs and pullovers and all that, like externally, when somebody, if you have a PT watching you and he's like, okay, your form is perfect and there's nothing to fix,
Yeah.
and you have all the intensity and volume and even progression in place, and still your lats aren't growing, and you're not really
Mm,
even feeling these movements in your lats, usually in that case, that's like the exception to the rule. That's like, okay, you're probably just not activating your lats very efficiently. So
mhm.
you're using like Terry's major or whatever, biceps or rear delts in your back movements. And in cases like that, I think it's actually beneficial to step back a little from the, the basic progressive overload thinking and all that, and spend some time building essentially a mind muscle connection to your lats. For
Mm.
example, it's like it. So you have to like pull back on the weights you're using, and really focus on, and shortened partials are actually excellent in these types of situations because you can feel the muscle a lot better in that shortened range near the contraction.
Mm.
So if somebody has to kind of like learn to engage their lats, I really wouldn't put them doing like lengthened partials first. I would really go the other way. Just,
Mm.
try to, contract the lats at the end of a machine pullover or something, where you can really easily feel it. And
Yeah.
then once you feel it there and you build that, it's really just neural pathways and, activation, and also kind of a nuanced mechanics. I think like there can be slight deviations in positioning of your joints and everything that you have to relearn in
Hmm.
those movements. But overall, it's like that's the one situation where I think it makes sense to prioritize that mind muscle connection for I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months,
Yeah.
until you can be kind of confident that okay, now at first I only felt my lats in that shortened range of the near the peak contraction in a machine pullover, but then I started increasing the range, and I kept the engagement on my lats, and now I can kind of feel even pull downs. And but
Yeah.
once you've built that, then you should try to go back to
Right.
doing all the basic stuff and kind of progressing those while hopefully maintaining. Yeah, so that would be like where I would use the mind muscle connection first.
Mm.
But if you don't have a problem with it, I think like overly focusing on the mind muscle connection is it's like it's a you're deviating from the things that actually build muscle.
Yeah.
So it's as long as the target muscle that you're trying to build, let's say your lats in a lat pull down,
Hmm.
as long as that is doing like 51% or more of the work, as
Mm.
long as it's the primary target of that movement, as long as it's failing first,
Hmm.
I don't care if you have 49% other muscle groups assisting, because you're
Hmm.
still primarily it's still an effective lat movement for you because it's 51% or more. So that's
Yeah.
like the break point. But if you're at less than 50%, it's like something else is failing, or
Yeah.
something else is working more than, your lats in a lat pull down. Then that's like when I think you should focus on the mind muscle connection. But overall, when you're in a position where, yeah, the hack squat is a great example. It's like you're probably uh, well, even for me, because my quads were really, really poorly activating when
Hmm.
I started training, even for the first 10 years.
Yeah.
And I have like a dominant posterior chain. My glutes, especially, take over really easily.
Yeah.
So even on hack squats, actually. So, which
Mm.
is interesting. But as long as you know you notice that when I fail a hack squat, it's slightly sooner. It's like the quads fail like a second before my glutes fail.
Right. Right.
That's still okay. That's
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's you don't have to be like worried about, well, I'm not getting the
Hmm.
greatest isolation type of isolating muscles. That's kind of unnatural for the human body anyway.
Mm.
You can get that better. Obviously, if you do the leg extension or something, like not a lot more than your quads should be working.
No.
But even there, like it's funny when they measure muscle activity during like an isolation machine movement, like a leg extension, your core is active and
Yeah.
everything. Like it's there's really no way to truly isolate muscles,
No. No.
and I don't think you have to. And if you try to like go with you know your priorities, isolation or mind muscle connection,
Mm.
uh, that's really not the way to build muscle.
Mm.
It can be beneficial if you have a really hard time engaging with the muscle, but it should only be like a temporary teaching tool.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take
Yeah.
there. If you were to look at your own physique and your own physique development over the years, would you say like your areas where you've responded better, so like your back, your hamstrings, your glutes, have you always had a better connection with those muscles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like inherently, it's always been that way. It's like right now I can pretty much cramp my lats just
Right.
thinking
Just
about it.
yeah, yeah.
And what was funny when I was doing RDLs, or I call them stiff leg deadlifts. When I was doing like heavy stiff leg deadlifts
Hmm.
when I was young, I would get lat soreness from that.
Right,
It
right.
was
Wow.
so even though that's a really crappy lat exercise, it was still like
Mm.
enough for me to get a even like a lat.
It's
Uh,
funny.
yeah.
It's funny you say I've had lat DOMs from doing bench pressing before whenever I do like flat barbell pressing.
But that's actually a pretty, especially if you arch a lot and
Yeah.
you like use mm, you're not doing those. I don't know the word in English. We call it like lachnapenk. It's like lying down like a fish. It's like a dead
Really
fish.
arched or
No. It's like the opposite
oh,
of
that's
that.
really
It's like
flat. Right, okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
So we call it you're benching like a dead fish.
yeah. Right, right,
So
yeah.
that's the opposite of it. But when you really arch and it's kind of like a powerlifting bench when you're retracting your shoulder blades and everything,
Mm,
it's like the lats are really they're not a dynamic agonist in the movement in the sense that they would help you lift the weight, but they're really like an active stabilizer.
hmm.
So it's not uncommon for people to really, even get a like a lat pump
Mm.
from a powerlifting style bench press. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, no, that's really cool. Last topic I really quickly wanted to touch on was intensity, Uti. So there's a growing trend in the UK I've noticed, maybe over the past few years, of people doing less sets. I say less total sets per exercise, perhaps less volume in general. I'd say certainly less volume than what we were doing, like say a decade ago. And yeah,
Mm.
closer proximity to failure, perhaps as well. So a lot of intensity in from the UK guys and girls. What are your takes? What are your thoughts on that style of training? So not so much. I think I mentioned this before. I wouldn't say it's like the Mike Mentzer hit training, but it's also not a million miles away from that either. It's definitely not
Mm.
what I'd classify as like super high volume training. It's every set is done with a lot of intent. What are your takes on that style of training?
Well, if correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of sounds like the old Dorian type training. So
Pretty
it wasn't
much. Yeah, but
because
I suppose he was a
Dorian.
Mike Mentzer. He trained very much like Mentzer, didn't he?
Actually, I was just gonna say that he had way more volume than Mentzer.
Did he?
Yeah, and yeah, because if you actually count the sets that were on even like on Blood and Guts,
Mm,
you can go back and look at like he said that okay, I only do like one top set or one working set of an exercise, but Leroy was spotting him on like the last four sets before he got like he was giving him forced reps on his way up on like the last three or four sets before he reached that heaviest set. So
right.
he was doing
Okay.
zero RIR basically on like four sets of the exercise, but
Yeah.
in his own mind, he was saying that okay, there was only one really heavy set, so that's the
Right.
only set I'm going to count.
Yeah.
But if you actually sort of compare that to what anybody else would consider a really, really hard working set,
Hmm.
Dorian kind of averaged, I think, in Blood and Guts anyway, which is a true point of reference for his training, is I think it was like 10 to 15 working sets of muscle, even though he kind of only counted maybe four.
Right. Right.
So his so-called warm-up sets or
Hmm.
approach sets to his top sets, they were harder than most people's working sets.
Hmm.
But anyway, it's as far as your question of like emphasizing more of the relative intensity and
Yeah.
going to failure and dropping down volume, it just comes back down to what I was saying is like that's the first thing you want to lock in is your intensity
Mm.
and your quality because even like the really high volume studies are mostly done on training to failure.
Hmm.
So if they find and they have found marginal benefits, albeit decreasing marginal benefits, but still like positive benefits from even up to fucking 50 sets per
Mm.
muscle group, and these are mostly to failure.
Hmm.
That sort of tells you that, yeah, you probably don't want to leave more than, I don't know, 1 or 2 reps in the tank on
Yeah.
any of your working sets, unless it's like really dangerous. You're doing like you don't know what you're doing, and you're trying to do a free barbell front squat for the first time or
Mm.
whatever. That
Yeah.
then it becomes a safety concern.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would still. I think it's a smart move to first perfect your form, your quality of reps, focus on each rep, go either to failure or really close to it, and then
Mm.
the volume is just like you, if you get the intended result, you feel like you grow well from, I don't know, 6 sets a week for a muscle group, which would be really low.
Yeah.
Well, more power to you. Like
Mm.
it's really good. You're going to be, injured less, and because if you have to do more volume, that always kind of, it takes more time, it takes more recovery resources, and it's going to be a burden on your connective tissues.
Mm.
So, but most people probably should try to find their own volume spot by, if the 6 sets per week, for example, like really low volumes, you're not gaining well from that, then maybe go to 8,
Mm.
see how that works, maybe go to 10. And once you hit a volume threshold that seems to work for you, I would just stay there and eke that out for as
Hmm.
long as it produces results. So, uh, yeah, I think it's a sounds like a reasonably smart way to go about it. The exact like execution of it, if I'm correct, there's a lot of guys doing really super. It's like 1 set per exercise and moving to the next one. Like
Mm.
there, I've seen a lot of that as well. So, nah, that sounds kind of low for
Yeah,
me
that does
because
sound low.
you
Yeah.
even just on like obviously when you have advanced trainers, like people who have been training for a long time, they're experienced, you can probably get the most out of your first set. But even for me, like I've been training for 28 years, I still find that when I do, let's say, 3 working sets on a movement, the first set probably isn't my best set.
Hmm.
It's usually I get something extra out. I kind of get in that groove for the second, maybe the third set.
Yeah.
And it's also like if I have to set up a new movement, and it becomes like a logistical thing.
Mm.
It's like I'd rather do one exercise, really set up for that, and do 3 sets there rather than 1 set per exercise and do 3 exercises.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
people might have different preferences.
Yeah,
So
I'd agree with that largely. I think one of the only exceptions being like a heavy RDL for me. It's like any more than 2 sets, and I find form starts to break down, and I have to lower the weight
oh
too
yeah, yeah,
much.
yeah. But
Yeah.
that's like one of those really, really high raw stimulus
Yeah.
magnitude
Yeah.
exercises where you can't really do a whole lot of sets.
No.
For example, when I had my hamstring back, what was it? Shoulders, back, and hamstring specialization phase,
Mm.
I just bumped up my stiff leg deadlift from 1 set to three
Hmm.
sets.
Right.
And even though like the 3 sets felt like a lot,
Yeah. Yeah. I
it
can
was
imagine.
whereas like hamstring curls, you can do those all day, even though they're all a failure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, look, Uti, this has been amazing. We're gonna call it there because it's time for me to pick the kids up
Yeah.
again. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. This has been brilliant once again. You've given us some great points, and yeah, no, I really appreciate it. We'll have to
Thank
do
you.
this again sometime in the future. And yeah, who knows? We might even see each other on stage again one day.
Possibly, possibly. Yeah, yeah. That'd be
But,
cool.
that'd be cool. But yeah, thanks for joining me, Uti. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you guys for watching and for listening, and we'll see you next time.